Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Living Your Bold Life interview series, where we are learning how to stand up for you and take bold action now. Today, we're talking with Valerie D'Ambrosio, the connection coach. Valerie is a visionary, storyteller, certified yoga teacher, intuitive life coach, and fiery spirit. Her infectious, living large nature encourages people to connect more deeply with self, health, wealth, intimacy, friendships, and spirit in order to create the thriving life they desire. Welcome, Valerie.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Let's just start with you telling everyone a bit about your journey and how you got to here in your life.
Yeah, well, I love the theme of this summit that you're offering because I feel like it's really important, and I think that a lot of us aren't told to really allow ourselves to step into our fullness, and I think that's basically what my journey has been. I'm going to go way back for this moment, but I really, I grew up in an environment and a family that I didn't feel super connected, didn't really feel like I fit in, and I felt like all these ways of being that I now embrace, but I made wrong for so long, like being sensitive or being emotional or being really loving and unopen with my expression of my love through my words or my touch. It wasn't really supported growing up, and so I really dimmed those aspects of myself for a long time. And when I stepped onto the path of consciousness, I read Celestine Prophecy when I was 17, and I felt like I returned home, and that's when it kind of started for me. And I started to deepen even more, and to teachers like Carolyn Mace and Marianne Williamson, and I also found the more logical left brain like Tony Robbins, and so I just never stopped. I never stopped exploring, and I think I was mostly interested in really knowing who I was, how I could show up more authentically. But then I also found this piece inside of me, truthfully, where I started to have a different understanding and relationship. Like A Course in Miracles says, a shift of perspective is a miracle. And I started to really go, okay, well, if my parents were really the parents that I chose, which I believe that, but I always didn't, that maybe I chose them for a reason, to be exactly as they were, to support me in being who I am. And over time, I just, I started to step more into it every day. But it was a journey and it was a challenge. I went through my own just self-berating and self kind of destroyed through, like, whether it was over-exercising, under-eating, overeating, or overworking, and just ways of kind of really kind of pushing my own self away and still kind of making myself wrong, but lifting up other people through coaching and yoga over the years. Mm-hmm. And I think I just finally just started to, over time, soften into myself and accept these parts of myself as gifts instead of burdens.
Wow. Wow. Love it. I'm in the middle of reading Marianne Williamson's Return to Love right now. You have to kind of go in and go out.
Yeah.
But
she's amazing. She's really just, I feel like I'm an auditory learner, so I listen to her, a lot of her stuff, but it's literally what I do as soon as I wake up in the morning. That's one of the tools I use, is I infiltrate myself with that information on a regular basis. So, but her voice is oftentimes very much my voice because it's just so common for me now,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, tell us a bit about, like, what it means to you to be a strong woman.
Yeah. So, I think, again, just to go back, my mother was a single mom raising two kids. Gosh, my parents were so young when they had us, and they were 20 and 21 when they had my sister, and just didn't know what they were doing. And so what I witnessed, because we oftentimes we just do what our role models did. We just pick up these patterns and these habits and we try them on. And if they seem like they're working, we use them as survival, and we never really question again oftentimes. And for me, my mom, she just wanted us to have the best of everything. at the expense of herself. You know, she didn't really nurture herself. I don't have one memory of my mother relaxing or lying on the couch or reading a book. My mom at one point had 3 jobs. Either she had 2 or 3 jobs pretty much throughout my childhood. And she was always just struggling. I mean, it was, you know, just that, but she was out like constantly being like wanting to help everybody, wanting to be there for everybody. You know, we're pretty poor. We lived in an extremely affluent town right outside of Manhattan. And she wanted us to feel, you know, like we fit in, and she wanted us to feel like we belong, but we didn't, you know, we just were so different. And so for me, my vision of a woman, of a strong woman at the time, was a woman that just never stops, you know, a woman that just keeps going, that says yes to everything, that pushes through everything, that forces everything, that controls everything, that makes everything happen. And for me, I realized over time that that started to burn me out big time. And I paid a tremendous price over time. It really affected me in my intimate relationships because I wasn't allowing space for them to fill. I was filling all the space. And I also didn't really allow them to lead at all. And then of course, I was, you know, exhausted and pissed that they would never lead, right? Um, so, and then I also thought it was just constantly doing, you know, constantly creating something. I mean, I would have, you know, 15 projects launching at one time and just keep going and going and filling my life. And slowly over time, I started to see that it started to cost me. It took me a little while to start getting it, but and it was when I went. It was a few things. I had launched Hanuman Festival, a festival in Boulder, and it costed me a lot in my relationship. As far as, you know, that just intimacy, it was just pretty much gone because I didn't have any space or time for him. And then it really costed my health. Once I sold Hanuman, I started to just keep pushing toward other things, but I started to get really sick. And I think that was the last straw for me, for my spirit being like, okay, you're not listening to us. We keep showing you these signs and you're not willing to stop. And so that was a gift for me. And when I went through my breakup of my long relationship, I moved up to Steamboat Springs, Colorado, with the sole intention of learning how to soften and deepen into my feminine. And I didn't know what that meant, but I had I had an idea in my head, and that's what I did. And I just I had to really like practice, you know, not checking my email every 5 minutes and learning to not just fill my days all the time. And so to me, I think that it's a woman when she can allow herself to be her authentic self. And when I say that, for me, what that is, it's emotional and creative, and it's also it's chaotic and it's stormy and it's diffused energy, right? We're multi, not even focused, we're just multifaceted. And for me, allowing that to be seen fully, not apologize for it, not withhold it, but also and simultaneously hold space and respect for other people showing up in their truth in each moment. Yeah, and while also assertively taking a stance in who I am.
Oh, I love it. It's just like that shift from, I love hearing your shift from the doing, like your mom. I just
Yeah.
was exhausted listening to all the
Right.
things you did,
No.
you know,
Yeah.
and yeah, sometimes it takes our body really shutting down to
Mhm.
listen, and you did. And now it sounds like you're in a being space versus the doing space.
Yeah, and I mean, it's still, honestly, Heather, every day it's I witness it, and it's really important for me to watch because obviously, I mean, I'm 43, I'm very patterned in this, you know. It was a very strong pattern in me. And so it's also very much another aspect of being a strong woman is offering just compassion, and detached compassion, whether that's from my own self instead of trying to manage somebody else's emotions, because that's what I was taught to do. If somebody around me feels something, or they, if they're feeling something that's uncomfortable, it's like, oh, well, let me say something so they're not feeling it. And I'm realizing instead it's showing, compassion for their humanness, but at the same time allowing them to have that spaciousness to go through that emotion on their own, recognizing it's just energy and motion. It's only our humanness that we create some big story around it.
I love it. What do you do? Like, what do you do in your day? I know you said you listen to people, and like, what other kinds of things do you do to kind of keep yourself grounded and holding this space? Because like you said, we are ingrained in our patterns.
Yeah. Oh, geez. So, well, one thing that I think another beautiful thing about the feminine quality, and that's not necessarily male, female, it's just that we all embody both energies, is the ability to be fluid. And what I recognize is that, allowing myself to be fluid with where I am, understanding that life ebbs and flows and life changes, and therefore making sure that I don't feel like that in order to ground into myself that I have to have a certain thing. And I did that for a really long time. I was completely committed to my 2.5-hour Kundalini meditation for 2.5 years, but so much to the point that it actually it was a fight every day, and it was exactly the opposite energy that I was actually intentionally setting to experience. And so for me, it's as much as I can doing something in the morning, whether that's I have 5 minutes to do it or 2 hours to do it. I call it spirit time. So allowing myself to drop into me, to spirit. And that is oftentimes, journaling is a really big thing for me, because I love that. I love speaking and writing is really, it just speaks to me. So it helps me feel connected. And I literally write a letter to God. That's what I do. Thank you for my life. Thank you for my day. And then if there's anything that's on the forefront of my mind, I'll be processing it. So that's just a way for also me to assimilate and digest, especially being a woman that it does like to have a full life, right? 'Cause that's a beautiful thing. But if I just keep filling and I don't allow that time for assimilation, I feel like that I'm not really actually allowing the things that I am learning to embody on a cellular level. So that's a big one. Meditation is really big for me. I would say I do that most days. And for me, it's a very personal practice too. I just let it be what it is in that moment. Some days, I sit and I visualize. Some days I just sit in silence. Some days I listen to music. Some days I actually do a chant. And that is also another way to me that I plug in to spirit, because that helps me feel grounded. But all of those things are very feminine for me. So my day can be really structured, but if I create spaciousness for fluidity, that helps me to be more in that balance of that masculine and feminine energy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I love it. Well,
Yeah.
and the way you were saying, like, staying open and fluid to doing new things and not having it be this rigid,
Yeah.
you have to do exactly this thing that you learned after doing that thing for 2.5 hours. I can't even imagine 2.5 hours.
Yeah. Well, and there were times when I was literally, and I'm not even joking, crawling to my cushion and making myself do it. And I was like, and one day I was like, what? Like, this isn't even nice. Like, it's not fun. It's not, I don't feel good when I do it.
Yes. I love that. I'm going to make myself be fluid and open.
Right. Totally. Yeah.
I was just thinking of one of the words, your descriptions in your intro around being a visionary and a storyteller. I'm curious a little bit about that.
Oh my gosh. It's really interesting because I love the modality of storytelling so much. First of all, I can't get into it now because way too much information. But one of the tools and one of the people that I work with, his name's Jamie Champion, and he created something that he basically can identify through this intuitive way of working, where he calls them superpowers, where these superpowers inside of you live in your 14 chakras. So that's the first thing. And I do his work and I love his work. And so my power of creativity, basically transforming beauty and create and transforming it into through words, it lives in my fifth chakra. So I create with my voice. So speaking it's very natural for me.
Yeah.
Clearly. I mean, I just keep but so storytelling, I feel like, is so wonderful because it's relatable. It's something that people can hear and they can get lost in it, and they can hear somebody else's story. And if they relate to it, now they feel rapport. They feel sometimes safe. They can feel free. They could feel all these wonderful emotions just from connecting through story. And so when I work with my clients, I'll listen to them, but then sometimes some people feel so vulnerable in sharing anything that's going on in their life. And when there's a story that's shared, that's a commonality, like a bond, they no longer feel alone. So I feel like it's really powerful. And I'm so glad you asked this, because there's a wonderful change maker in Denver, Colorado. His name's Tyrone Beverly, and I've done a few things with him. And we were at a dinner the other night, and we were talking about what had happened in Virginia. And I was living in Virginia for the summer, so we were talking about like the whole thing with the Ku Klux Klan and how big that was and everything. We were just talking about how there's always two sides to a story. And he just looked at us, and my friend and I, and he was like, "So what do we do?" And I love that question. When you see what's happening in the world, you're like, great, okay, here's the problem. Now how can we show up and be the solution? And I just looked at him and I said, I feel like storytelling is a wonderful modality because especially living in Virginia Beach, I've lived in Boulder for 17 years. I've lived in Colorado rather, conscious environment. And then I go into this area that's not very conscious. So I had this awakening of, wow, like I'm the minority. And so in that regard, right? And so when we were talking about storytelling, he basically told me about this thing that he created. They did one night an event with 250 people, and they all wore these headphones, and they listened to different people's stories that was all pre-recorded, while simultaneously listening to music that was raising their vibration. And what this did is it created connection. It rose awareness about certain things that were happening in the world. And so now we've partnered where I'm going to actually help him launch the next one.
What was his name again?
Tyrone Beverly.
Tyrone Beverly.
Yeah.
Look him up, and
please do.
Let us all know when you're doing your next event. Really cool.
I'm like so excited because because what you brought up, the storytelling. I mean, I don't know about you, but that is such a way that I've always felt like I learn the most from.
Absolutely. And like you said, the connection that can happen is really cool. Well, share with us some skills or tools around ways that we can connect with our inner child, and maybe give some context for why I'm asking you about inner child when we haven't actually talked about it.
Yeah. So yeah, as we'd spoken about, for me, what I recognize when I work with individuals, that oftentimes, here we are in our adult way, and we have, and I interestingly was having a conversation with a client recently, and she saw this pattern in her, right? Awareness is the first step. And in seeing this pattern, there was so much judgment and shame. And she was just like, I just want to get rid of it. I just want to get rid of it. And so when I started to invite in the thought of compassion, it's like she couldn't connect the dots to get from the judgment and the shame, because her rational mind knew that it's not okay, right? It to her, right? She's like, this is not okay. I'm an adult. I know better, right? But there wasn't any space for compassion. And so when I started to dive in and peel back more layers and unpack it a little bit, I started to ask her some questions, and we realized that this pattern that she'd been doing, she ultimately watched her greatest role model, which her older sister, show her. And so when we looked at it, I go, oh my gosh. So basically what happened is you saw that, it was role model to you, thought it was the right thing to do. You picked it up like you would try on a pair of clothing. You tried it on, it started to work. So for survival, you just kept using it. And even though you got a little judged here and there for that pattern, it still served you. And now it was a habit. And so it was almost that moment of going, oh, it's not yours. You just picked it up along the way. It was almost like it diffused the energy of like, it's like mine and I have to have it and it's who I am, the identity of it. But then in addition to that, I was like, in a moment when we get triggered from anyone, anything, whether it could be somebody like family, which usually triggers pretty big. It could be a boss. It could be an intimate partner. It could be a friend. It doesn't matter. It could be somebody that's next to you in line that gives you a funny look. We get triggered, and in an instant, it can bring us back to maybe an experience in our lifetime when we were like 3, 5, 10, 7, whatever it is. And in that moment, because time, space, continuum, all times happening at the same time, we can feel as if it's happening. And so what I was explaining, and this is the whole big work of, to me, the inner child, is that in that moment, that little girl or that little boy who felt rejected, who felt not enough, who felt not, or too much, whatever it is still present. They're as much in the room as the adult you. And because of the time-space continuum. And when it was interesting, when I was talking to my client, she goes, I wish that I had a mother that could that showed me compassion in those moments. And I was like, yeah, but here's the gift. You get to be that for yourself. And that's what me is inner child work. It's taking that little boy or girl that was wounded or traumatized at some point in our lives and being able to hold space for them and letting them know in that moment that they are so lovable and so worthy and so incredible. And that is, I don't know, I love this work, Heather, so much, because I do feel like if we return to it enough, it does on a cellular level really start to stick that, we are good. We're good.
Is there a way that you could share, like, if someone, because, as a therapist, I could do work like that with people.
Mm-hmm.
But if I was on my own, or, one of the listeners was on their own and wanted to kind of practice that a little bit, how would you recommend doing that? Because there's being careful a little bit, I think, too, about trauma and things like that.
Sure.
But how do you do it on your own without having had a lot of experience yet?
Right, totally. And just to, a disclaimer, I'm a coach, and it's very different from a therapist. Where a therapist, they will go, if somebody comes to me with deep trauma, that is not my job. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not, that's not my expertise. I'm not educated in that area to work with. That's when I would go, okay, so I'm going to give you Heather's number or a referral, right? Yeah. So I'm definitely talking about more, nothing that's like a deep traumatic thing. This is more so the wound, right? The wound of, maybe, yes, abandonment. You're right. Your mother left when you were 2, or maybe that your sister really, negated you all the time as a child, or whatever it is, right? Or something as simple as Mean Girls in high school, right? I mean, even though it's not simple, it's a little girl, right? So, the way that I would do, and this is part of the free gift that I would love to offer, is actually taking them through the visualization of this work but in instilling their mind and centering and grounding and meditating, whatever you want to call it, taking some time to go into your heart center, because that to me is this beautiful space that they can access that little boy or girl inside of them. And I picture myself coming to that little child that is hurt. Maybe it's in that moment somebody said they didn't want to be with me, and I got rejected. I felt rejected. Well, I would go to her and I would speak to her. I'd be like, hi, honey, I'm here for you. And I'd let her talk to me. And sometimes she's like, I'm mad at you. I don't want to talk to you. I don't, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to sit here and I'm just going to be here and I'm just going to love you. And I'm like, it's okay for you to feel what you want to feel. And I just let it unfold. Sometimes we just sit there and she slowly just can start looking at me. Sometimes she lets me hug her. Sometimes she lets me talk to her. Sometimes we change it and she's happy again. And sometimes I have to return back to that same wound until there is a movement around it. So it takes time. It takes, presence.
Yeah. But I just hear, even just when you start talking to yourself that way, hey, sweetie, and it just like softened, like I just can soften as I was listening to you,
Yeah.
and so if all we did was actually just spend a minute talking that way to ourselves,
Right.
what a shift it
Yeah.
would be. Oh,
Totally. I mean, I mean, people probably see me. I'll drive in my car, and if I notice something's happening, I'll pull down my mirror in front of me, and I'll just say things like that to myself. I'm like, you know what? I know you're hurting, and I love you. I love you so much. And that's really, I think mirror talk is really good because you're reflected in that moment, and that person that you're being reflected by is you. And if when you start to do that enough, like I did it for years, and it didn't resonate. I didn't get it. And then one time I did it and I was like, and I saw myself and I was like, I love you. It was crazy. I mean, years I did it for. So you never know.
yeah. Except you're driving your car. I'm like, stop, pull over.
I know. Usually at a light. Usually at a light. And I'm like, right? Yeah.
I love you.
We're probably gonna get in an accident now, but I love you.
Yeah, we might,
Yeah.
Wow. Well, gosh, I want to ask you so many things, and I could just keep chatting. Is there something, I don't know, that we have more time, I think, is there something else around feeling empowered or strong as a woman?
Yeah, I love this, and so I just taught at a festival, and as I was leading it with one of my best friends and just brilliant teachers, Kristen Malia, and we were talking about the stance of being assertive within relationships. And we kind of categorized it to break it down for simplicity into 3 ways that we can show up within relationship. And this was, and you can, and because language is so interesting and you can insert any words that would feel, more comfortable for you. But the way we looked at it is that, you can show up passive aggressive within a relationship, meaning that let's say somebody, maybe you want something in a relationship, but you're afraid to ask for it or you're afraid to step into it. Or maybe that, maybe you want something in a relationship and this could be intimate relationship, business, friendship, doesn't matter. And that person wants something different than you. And so passively aggressive would be to either, kind of not really say what you want to say because you're afraid of you're kind of beating around the bush and not being really, forward with it, or even backing down from it. So that's where passive aggressive wouldn't be the right word, but kind of withholding your own desires because you're afraid, right? And then, or aggressively taking a stance in that instant where it's just like, I don't care what you want. This is what I want, and not willing to compromise, and there's no space. And or the other stance is standing assertive. It's hearing what the other person wants or what they stand in a certain situation, acknowledging it, really being with that, and letting them know you hear them, while simultaneously also being like, and this is where I stand on, and this is how I feel it with it. Let's come to a place where there can either be a compromise or a peace or something, but not willing to. There are some things that we're not willing to maybe back down, or maybe we feel that it's really important to stand on this. And I think that, especially in working with mostly women, but even within relationships, when I do couples coaching, there is this, there's a constant, a lot of people, when they think that taking an assertive stand, that means they're arrogant, that means they're, or they're not worthy enough to take that stance. And I think it's a really wonderful thing for us to take pause and to start getting curious around when that kind of a situation comes up. What's our stance usually?
Wow. What's our stance? Assertive is probably needing some work.
Right.
I love that difference between, it's like moving against, moving
Right.
away, or just holding both.
Yeah.
You keep using the phrase like making space.
Yeah.
It's such just space to breathe
Yeah.
and pause for a second.
Yeah. I'm learning.
Yeah.
Well, and it's so interesting because two things, within my own relationship, I have a phenomenal boyfriend. I love him so much. And I went out to Colorado, and so I was away for a little while, and I wanted to extend my trip. and he really missed me. And so it was so interesting because what I wanted to do was I wanted to so I told him, I waited for the timing. Timing is important, especially with a man, because you want to respect, the way he thinks. And so I told him, and he was upset. He was like, I have to go. And I was like, oh, and he's like, I have to go. And he called me back, said, I was upset. I just needed to. I was like, well, thank you. That's wonderful and conscious of you. And then he was really upset. And I watched myself wanting to be like, backpedal, like, oh, I don't have to go. I don't have to extend my trip. And I watched this inside of me, like, I don't want to make him upset. I don't want to ruffle any feathers. I don't want to hurt his feelings. I don't want to. And then I was just like, it's okay to stand in what you want and let him. He's going to be sad, but that's okay, because that'll pass too. And so it was a really wonderful thing for me to witness, sitting in my own discomfort of asking what I want, to still, to stand true in it and to let him feel his feelings fully. That was big, right?
I love that. Because it's like, we're not responsible for their feelings. We can be kind and generous about them, but for whatever reason, maybe that was to his benefit to have to sit through that and learn about something through that while you were going through yours. And we steal that from people. I think, like, no.
Right.
Oh, I love that.
Think,
what a great story.
Right? Because I love stories. But because we think like, we're doing them a favor, but really in the end, it's actually doing them a disservice, because all they're experiencing is that emotion moving through their body. And if they don't experience it moving through their body, because it's energy, and energy doesn't, it only changes form. It doesn't, it just moves, it needs to move, right? Or else it'll get stuck. And who knows, whatever their toxic stuff is going to be, the more and more we just keep building on top of each other. Yeah. So I don't know, that's a big one. And I see that a lot in relationship, where we kind of maneuver ourselves so that the other person doesn't feel pain, or we don't really want to speak our truth. And I got to tell you, I don't know, as a woman, I love when my man kindly puts me in my place, like kindly is like, hey babe, just so you know, I got this, or something. And I'm just like, oh, thank you for reminding me that I don't have to like do it all, or whatever. I just love that dance between any relationship, where you can authentically show up and let each other know how you feel, where you are, how you stand,
Yes. Oh, I love that. Oh, well, I could just sit and chat about all of these things all day long.
So fun.
There's so much fun to get to connect and hear, you're doing beautiful, beautiful work in the world. So thank you so much, Heather. Out in the world.
Back at you. This is wonderful. This is really, I love it. Just supporting people and, fully taking up that space.
Yeah. I love it. Taking up space.
Yeah.
Tell a little bit more, just describe, you mentioned the free gift. Just tell everybody just a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So basically what I'm going to do is just, like I said, offer a visualization for you to drop in and be able to, in your own way, connect with your inner child, to just meet them with that compassion. And like I said, it might take some time to go back in again with even one situation, but it's really just a tool with the intention of supporting you to connect with these deeper parts of yourself that may have been wounded, or you feel that are shamed a little, that you get to return to and offer a little love and compassion.
Oh, that's great. Oh, I love that it's now going to be audio for us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for being with us today. I've really enjoyed talking with you.
Oh my gosh, me too. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for being here, and we'll be back with more.
Yes, bye.
Bye everyone.